Zivar stood tall in the grand hall of the Cretan High Command. His smooth gray skin reflected the dim light, and his sharp yellow eyes scanned the room. Around him, holograms displayed images of Earth, a small blue planet orbiting an average star. To him, it looked unremarkable. "The humans are an unpredictable species," said High Commander Vector, his voice cold and commanding. "We need to understand their military power before deciding if they are worthy allies. That is your mission, Zivar." Zivar saluted, his posture rigid. He was one of the most skilled soldiers of the Cretan army, known for his discipline and loyalty. But deep inside, he doubted this mission. Humans were a young species, barely a speck in the galaxy's history. What could they possibly offer to the great Cretan Empire? As Zivar boarded his sleek silver shuttle, he reviewed the reports on humans. The files painted a strange picture. Humans were emotional, chaotic, and far too dependent on instincts. They fought wars not just for resources, but for ideas, beliefs, and sometimes even personal grudges. To Zivar, this sounded like weakness. The journey to Earth was uneventful. Zivar spent the time analyzing videos of human soldiers. He watched their training drills, their battlefield strategies, and even their casual moments in military camps. Yet, something felt odd. Humans weren't as sloppy as he expected. There was a strange energy in their movements, a mix of determination and unpredictability. When his ship finally landed on Earth, Zivar stepped out and was immediately greeted by the crisp air of the human base. The sun shone brightly, and the ground beneath his boots felt solid and warm. Around him, human soldiers moved quickly, some carrying weapons, others shouting commands. The scene was noisy, almost chaotic, but it wasn't as disorganized as he had imagined. "Welcome, Commander Zivar," said Captain Alina Carter, a tall human woman with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. She led him through the base, explaining their daily routines. Zivar nodded politely, but inside, he was already judging them. The base was a mix of old and new technology. Human vehicles roared as they sped across the grounds, and their weapons looked crude compared to the sleek designs of Cretan tech. Yet there was a sense of purpose here. Soldiers trained in groups, pushing each other to run faster, lift heavier, and aim better. They laughed and cheered as if they were enjoying themselves. Zivar found this strange. In the Cretan army, training was serious and silent. Soldiers followed orders without question, their faces cold and focused. But here, humans seemed to find joy even in hard work. It confused him. "Do your soldiers always act this lively?" Zivar asked Captain Carter, his tone neutral but curious. She smiled. "That's the human way. We work hard, but we also support each other. It's what keeps us going, especially in tough times." Zivar didn't respond. He couldn't understand how laughter and camaraderie could make a difference in battle. To him, it felt unnecessary, even unprofessional. As the tour continued, Zivar noticed more oddities. Humans sparred with each other, using clever tricks to gain the upper hand. One soldier pretended to stumble, only to catch his opponent off guard with a swift move. Another group used creative teamwork to complete an obstacle course, cheering loudly when they succeeded. Zivar couldn't help but feel intrigued. These humans weren't following rigid rules like his people did. They adapted, improvised, and found ways to succeed, even when the odds weren't in their favor. By the end of the day, Zivar stood at the edge of the base, watching the sunset. The sky turned shades of orange and purple, colors he rarely saw on his homeworld. Behind him, the human soldiers were still training, their laughter echoing in the air. For the first time, Zivar felt a flicker of doubt. Maybe humans weren't as weak as he thought. There was something unique about them, something he couldn't quite define. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Zivar clenched his fists. "They're different," he muttered to himself. But different doesn't mean strong. Still, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was going to challenge everything he believed about humans, and maybe even himself. Zivar walked through the human military base, his sharp yellow eyes scanning every detail. His mind was a storm of thoughts, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The humans didn't behave like any army he had encountered before. Their base was loud and alive, filled with laughter, shouting, and constant movement. To him, it felt chaotic, but there was something oddly organized about their chaos. A group of human soldiers ran past him, their boots thudding on the ground. They were covered in sweat, but still managed to smile and joke with each other. One of them noticed Zivar and waved. "Hey there, alien dude. Enjoying Earth yet?" Zivar stared, unsure how to respond. On his homeworld, no soldier would ever speak so casually to a visitor, especially not one from another species. Humans, it seemed, had no concept of proper military decorum, or so he thought. Captain Alina Carter approached him with a clipboard in hand. "Commander Zivar, we're about to begin our combat drills. I think you'll find them educational." Zivar nodded, his expression neutral. "I look forward to seeing how humans conduct their training." She led him to an open field where dozens of soldiers were gathered. They stood in small groups, their weapons slung over their shoulders, chatting and laughing as they waited for instructions. Zivar raised an eyebrow. This was not how Cretan soldiers prepared for training. A sharp whistle cut through the air, and the soldiers snapped to attention. Their laughter vanished in an instant, replaced by serious, focused expressions. Zivar blinked, surprised by the sudden change. Perhaps there was more discipline here than he had given them credit for. The drills began with a series of exercises. Soldiers climbed ropes, crawled under barbed wire, and carried heavy weights. What caught Zivar's attention wasn't the exercises themselves, but the way the soldiers encouraged each other. When one soldier stumbled, others rushed to help. When someone finished a task, their teammates cheered. "They seem overly emotional," Zivar commented to Captain Carter. She smiled. "We call it teamwork. When one of us struggles, the others step up. It's how we succeed." Zivar didn't reply, but he couldn't deny that the soldiers' energy was impressive. He had always believed that emotions were a weakness in battle. Yet, here were humans using their emotions to push each other forward. The next drill involved mock combat. The soldiers split into two teams, each tasked with capturing the other's flag. Zivar watched closely as the teams moved into position. At first, their movements seemed random and uncoordinated, but as the exercise progressed, he realized there was a method to their madness. One team set up a distraction, drawing their opponents away from the flag. Meanwhile, a smaller group snuck around the battlefield, using the terrain to stay hidden. When the opposing team finally noticed, it was too late. The flag had been captured. Zivar frowned. This was not how battles were fought in the Cretan army. His people relied on strict formations and precise commands. There was no room for improvisation. Yet the humans had just won by breaking all the rules. As the soldiers celebrated their victory, Zivar turned to Captain Carter. "Your tactics are unusual. They lack discipline and structure." "Unusual, maybe," she replied with a smirk. "But they work." Zivar couldn't argue with that. The humans had succeeded where he thought they would fail. It was unsettling. Later that evening, Zivar wandered the base, his thoughts racing. He saw soldiers relaxing after their drills, sharing food and stories. Their camaraderie was unlike anything he had seen before. In the Cretan army, soldiers were focused solely on their duties. Friendships and emotions were considered distractions. "Why do you waste time like this?" he asked one of the soldiers, a young man named Davis. Davis chuckled. "Waste time? Nah, this is how we recharge. You can't fight if you're running on empty, right?" Zivar tilted his head, confused but intrigued. There was something about the way humans connected with each other that seemed powerful. As the night wore on, Zivar stood on a hill overlooking the base. The humans' behavior didn't make sense to him, yet he couldn't deny their effectiveness. They were loud, emotional, and unpredictable. but they were also resourceful, determined, and incredibly united. For the first time, Zivar wondered if there was more to strength than discipline and strategy. Maybe the humans' greatest weapon wasn't their technology or tactics, but their spirit. And that thought left him deeply unsettled. The next day, Zivar woke early, his mind still restless from everything he had observed. Humans were strange creatures, full of contradictions. They were emotional yet determined, chaotic yet effective. Today, he would witness their war games, a special training exercise designed to simulate real combat. Zivar stood with Captain Elena Carter on a raised platform overlooking a large training field. The area was filled with obstacles, trenches, and mock buildings. Human soldiers were spread out, preparing their weapons and equipment. Despite the serious atmosphere, some of them joked and laughed, as if this was all just a game. "They don't seem to take this seriously," Zivar remarked, his tone sharp. "Oh, they take it very seriously," Captain Carter replied with a grin. "But you'll see soon enough. Humans don't need to look serious to fight seriously." The training began with a loud horn. Two teams of soldiers, identified by red and blue armbands, moved into action. Zivar leaned forward, his sharp eyes tracking their movements. At first glance, it looked disorganized. Soldiers sprinted in different directions, shouting commands and signals that Zivar didn't fully understand. "This is chaos," he muttered. "Not chaos," Carter corrected. "Adaptability." Zivar watched closely as the red team launched their first attack. They sent a group charging directly toward the blue team's position, firing simulated weapons. The blue team responded by setting up a defensive line, holding their ground. For a moment, it seemed like a straightforward battle. But then, Zivar noticed something unexpected. While the red team kept the blue team distracted with their frontal attack, a smaller group of red soldiers had circled around through a hidden trench. They struck from the side, catching the blue team off guard. "That was clever," Zivar admitted reluctantly. "Cleverness is one of our strengths," Carter said proudly. "Humans don't just follow orders. We think, we improvise, and we adapt to the situation." The blue team quickly regrouped, using smoke grenades to obscure their movements. Zivar was impressed by how fast they recovered. They split into smaller units, each taking a different route to flank the red team. What followed was a chaotic but thrilling series of maneuvers, with both teams trying to outsmart each other. Zivar noticed that the humans relied heavily on communication and trust. Soldiers called out warnings, shared strategies, and covered each other without hesitation. There was no single leader barking orders. Instead, everyone worked together, almost instinctively. One moment stood out to Zivar. The blue team soldier had been pinned down by enemy fire. Instead of retreating, two of his teammates rushed to his aid, creating a distraction so he could escape. They risked themselves for one soldier, Zivar observed, his tone a mix of confusion and admiration. "That's what we do," Carter replied. "No one gets left behind." The game continued for nearly an hour, each side using clever tactics to outmaneuver the other. Zivar found himself leaning forward, fully engrossed. The humans weren't just fighting. They were thinking, planning, and adapting with every move. In the final moments of the game, the red team appeared to have the upper hand. They had captured most of the blue team's territory and were closing in on their base. But just as victory seemed certain, the blue team unleashed a daring plan. Using a series of decoys, they lured the red team into a trap. Hidden soldiers emerged from behind cover, cutting off the red team's retreat. At the same time, a small group infiltrated the red base and captured their flag, securing a last-minute victory for the blue team. The field erupted in cheers as the blue team celebrated their hard-earned win. Even the red team joined in, laughing and congratulating their opponents. Zivar stood in silence, trying to process what he had just seen. These humans, who he had once thought of as weak and undisciplined, had demonstrated a level of creativity and resilience that was unlike anything he had encountered. They fight with more than just weapons, Zivar said finally. They fight with their minds. Carter nodded. And their hearts. That's what makes us human. As the soldiers began clearing the field, Zivar felt a strange sense of admiration for them. They had shown him something he never expected: strength through unity, courage through connection, and victory through ingenuity. For the first time, Zivar wondered if his own people could learn something from the humans. As the day turned into evening, Zivar walked through the human base, his thoughts filled with the events of the training game. The humans had shown a side of warfare he had never experienced, one where heart and mind worked together in ways that defied his logic. He wanted to understand more about what drove these soldiers, what gave them their unshakable determination and bond. He found himself near a campfire where a group of soldiers had gathered. Their laughter echoed in the cool night air as they shared stories and meals. Zivar hesitated, unsure if he was welcome, but one of the soldiers noticed him. "Hey, Commander Zivar, come join us," the man said with a grin, patting an empty spot on a log. Reluctantly, Zivar stepped closer and sat down. The humans didn't seem intimidated by his alien presence. Instead, they treated him like one of their own, offering him food and drink. "Tell me," Zivar began, his voice steady, "what motivates you to fight? Your methods are unlike anything I've seen before." The group fell quiet for a moment, exchanging glances. Then a woman named Sergeant Maria spoke up. "For me, it's my family. My mom, dad, and little brother. They're the reason I'm here. I fight so they can live in peace." Another soldier, Private Jackson, nodded. "Same here. My wife's pregnant with our first kid. I'm fighting for the future, so my kid can grow up safe." Zivar tilted his head, puzzled. "You fight for individuals, for your families. That seems inefficient. Shouldn't your loyalty be to the army or your leaders?" Maria shook her head. "The army is important, sure, but it's the people we love that keep us going. When things get tough, when it feels like we can't take another step, we think about them. That's what gives us strength." Zivar remained silent, trying to process this new perspective. On his homeworld, soldiers were taught to suppress personal connections. Attachments were seen as distractions, weaknesses that could compromise their duty. Yet, these humans claimed that their personal bonds made them stronger. As the conversation continued, more soldiers shared their reasons for fighting. One had joined to honor a fallen sibling, another to protect their hometown from future threats. Each story was unique, but they all shared a common thread: love and connection. "What about you?" Zivar asked Captain Alina Carter, who had joined the group unnoticed. She smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "I fight for all of them," she said, gesturing to the soldiers around her. "It's my job to lead them, to protect them, and to make sure they make it home. Every decision I make is for them." Her words struck Zivar deeply. On Cretan, leaders were respected for their authority and power, but Carter's leadership seemed rooted in care and responsibility. She didn't just command her soldiers, she valued them. "Your way is unusual," Zivar admitted, "but it appears to be effective." Maria chuckled. "It's not just effective, it's who we are. Humans fight with their hearts as much as with their weapons." As the night went on, Zivar listened to their stories, laughed at their jokes, and even shared a little about his own world. He began to see the humans not just as soldiers, but as individuals with hopes, dreams, and struggles. When the fire began to die down, most of the soldiers drifted off to their tents. Zivar stayed behind, gazing into the glowing embers. Carter remained with him, sensing he had more on his mind. "You're not like us, Commander," she said gently, "but I think you're starting to understand us." Zivar nodded slowly. "Your people fight for reasons beyond survival or conquest. You fight for each other, for something greater than yourselves. That is remarkable." Carter smiled. "That's what makes us human." Zivar didn't respond, but deep down, He felt a shift in his understanding of humanity. These soldiers had shown him a strength that came not from discipline or training, but from the bonds they shared. It was a strength that could not be measured, yet it was undeniably powerful. As he returned to his quarters, Zivar couldn't shake the thought that his own people might be missing something. For all their discipline and strategy, perhaps they lacked the one thing that made humans truly extraordinary: the heart of a soldier. The alarms blared across the base, cutting through the quiet of the early morning. Zivar jolted awake, his sharp senses immediately on high alert. Outside, human soldiers were already rushing to their positions, their movements swift and purposeful. The calm atmosphere of the campfire from the previous night had vanished, replaced by a tense readiness. Captain Alina Carter appeared at Zivar's door, her expression firm but calm. "We're under attack," she said without hesitation. "A rogue faction from your people has crossed into this sector. They'd been raiding outposts, and now they're coming for us." Zivar's chest tightened. "My people. This cannot be true. The Cretan value honor. We do not attack unprovoked." Carter raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. "Honor or not, they're here, and we need to defend ourselves. Will you help us?" Zivar hesitated. His loyalty to his people was unshakable, yet he had grown to respect these humans. He nodded firmly. "I will." The battle began moments later. From the command tower, Zivar watched as Cretan warships descended, their sleek designs glinting under the morning sun. The soldiers on the ground moved into formation, their discipline matching their courage. As the first wave of Cretan troops landed, Zivar saw the stark contrast between the two forces. The Cretan moved like a machine, precise and calculated. The humans, in contrast, seemed chaotic at first glance, their movements unpredictable. But Zivar had learned that this chaos hid a deeper strategy. The Cretan opened fire, their weapons striking with deadly precision. Human soldiers responded immediately, using cover and clever tactics to avoid direct hits. Zivar observed how the humans communicated, their voices filled with urgency, but never panic. "Red team, flank left. Blue team, hold the line." Carter's voice rang out over the comms, steady and confident. Zivar joined the battlefield, his tall, armored frame standing out among the humans. His plasma spear crackled as he engaged the invaders, each strike precise and powerful. The humans around him fought with equal determination, their courage unwavering even in the face of superior Cretan technology. At one point, Zivar found himself back-to-back with Maria. She grinned, despite the chaos around them. "Not bad for an alien, huh?" Zivar smirked, a rare expression for him. "You're not so bad yourself, human." The battle raged on, but the Cretan began to falter. The humans' adaptability was proving to be their greatest weapon. When one plan failed, they quickly shifted to another, outmaneuvering the rigid Cretan tactics. Zivar noticed something else. The humans fought not just for survival, but for each other. He saw soldiers risking their lives to pull injured comrades to safety, covering one another with unwavering trust. Then came the turning point. A group of Cretan soldiers had managed to breach the human defenses, heading straight for the command tower. Carter and a small team intercepted them, but they were outnumbered. Zivar didn't hesitate. He charged into the fray, his plasma spear slicing through the air. Together with Carter's team, they pushed back the attackers, reclaiming the tower. Breathing heavily, Carter glanced at Zivar. "I owe you one." Zivar shook his head. "You owe me nothing. This is your fight, but it has become mine as well." By the time the sun began to set, the battle was over. The humans had won, driving the Cretan forces back. The base was damaged, but the spirits of the soldiers remained strong. Zivar stood with Carter on the battlefield, surveying the aftermath. "Your people are unlike any I've known," he said. "You fight with heart, with determination. You are not just soldiers, you are something more." Carter smiled, though there was a trace of exhaustion in her eyes. "We fight for each other, Zivar. That's our greatest strength. As the surviving soldiers gathered to honor their fallen comrades, Zivar felt a deep respect for the humans. They had taught him that war was not just about tactics and strength. It was about unity, sacrifice, and the will to protect what mattered most. For the first time in his life, Zivar wondered if his people could learn from the humans. Perhaps strength wasn't just about discipline and precision. Perhaps true strength came from the heart. The days following the battle were filled with repairs, healing, and reflection. The human base had survived, but the scars of the fight were evident. Zivar walked through the camp, observing the soldiers as they worked tirelessly to rebuild. Despite their exhaustion, they laughed and supported each other, their spirits unbroken. Among them, Zivar noticed one soldier standing apart. It was Private Jackson, the man who had spoken about fighting for his unborn child. He looked deep in thought, his rifle slung across his back. Zivar approached him, curious. "You seem troubled, Jackson," Zivar said, his voice calm. Jackson turned and gave a small smile. "Just thinking. That battle made me realize how much I have to lose, but it also reminded me why I'm here." Before Zivar could reply, alarms blared again. This time, it wasn't a full-scale attack, but a distress signal. A human reconnaissance team had been ambushed while scouting the area. They were trapped, surrounded by Cretan forces, and running out of time. Captain Carter quickly gathered her team. "We're going to get them out," she said firmly. "Every life matters." Zivar admired her determination, but couldn't help questioning the logic. Risking more lives for a small team. Is this wise? Carter looked him in the eye. "It's not about numbers, Zivar. It's about our duty to each other. No one gets left behind." The rescue team moved swiftly, with Zivar joining them. They'd reached the ambush site, a rocky valley surrounded by towering cliffs. The trapped soldiers were pinned down behind a crumbling wall, their position hopeless without help. As the team prepared their plan, Carter outlined their strategy. "We'll create a diversion to draw their fire. Jackson, you'll lead a small group to extract the trapped team." Jackson nodded, his face serious. "Understood, Captain." Zivar studied the terrain and the enemy positions. The Cretan forces were well-equipped and entrenched. It would take more than a simple diversion to succeed. When the signal was given, the rescue mission began. Carter's team opened fire from the cliffs, drawing the attention of the Cretan troops. Jackson and his group moved quickly, zigzagging through the rocky terrain to avoid enemy fire. But the Cretan were not easily fooled. They quickly adjusted, splitting their focus between the cliffs and the extraction team. In the chaos, Zivar saw a critical moment. A Cretan sniper had locked onto Jackson, whose group was just meters away from the trapped soldiers. Without hesitation, Zivar charged forward, his plasma spear glowing with energy. The sniper fired, but Zivar was faster. He deflected the shot with his spear and took down the sniper in a single fluid motion. Jackson turned, surprised. "Thanks, Commander," he shouted over the noise. "Focus on your mission," Zivar replied, his voice firm. As the extraction team reached the trapped soldiers, one of them, a young medic, was injured and unable to walk. Jackson didn't hesitate. He hoisted the medic onto his back, even as enemy fire rained down around them. "Go. I'll cover you," Jackson shouted to his team. The others hesitated, but they knew Jackson was right. They moved ahead with the rescued soldiers, leaving Jackson behind. Zivar saw Jackson's position. He was exposed, carrying the medic while firing his rifle with one hand. The Cretan forces began to focus their fire on him, sensing an easy target. Without thinking, Zivar sprinted toward Jackson. He reached the human just as a barrage of shots came their way. Using his plasma shield, Zivar deflected the incoming fire, creating a path for Jackson to retreat. "Keep moving, human," Zivar growled. Jackson gritted his teeth and ran, the medic still on his back. Together, they made it back to the rescue team, who provided cover fire as they retreated to safety. When they finally reached the base, the soldiers erupted in cheers. Jackson was hailed as a hero, his courage and selflessness inspiring everyone. Later that evening, Zivar found Jackson sitting quietly, the medic he had saved by his side. The young soldier was grateful, but Jackson seemed uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what anyone else would have done," Jackson said. "No," Zivar corrected, his voice serious. "What you did required great courage and selflessness. Among my people, such acts are rare. You humans, you continue to surprise me." Jackson smiled, his humility evident. "We look out for each other. That's what it means to be human." As Zivar walked away, he couldn't help but feel a deep admiration for these soldiers. They fought not for glory or power, but for the lives of those they cared about. Jackson's act of bravery had shown him the true heart of humanity, one that was willing to sacrifice everything for another. The following days were filled with the aftermath of their most recent victory. The humans celebrated their triumph, but Zivar noticed a shift in their mood. They were no longer simply soldiers, but a team, a family. And he, an alien commander from a distant world, had become part of that family. Zivar had learned much from these humans, but there was one thing that still puzzled him. Despite their fierce loyalty to each other, their strength didn't seem to come from fear or duty alone. It was something deeper. He could see it in their eyes, their need to protect not just their comrades, but all life. They were fighters, not because they had to be, but because they chose to be. One morning, Captain Carter called a meeting. The tension in her voice was unmistakable. "We've received intel," she began, standing at the front of the room. "A large Cretan fleet is on its way. They intend to destroy everything we've built here. They'd want us gone." The room fell silent. The weight of the situation was clear. The Cretan were strong, their warships nearly unbeatable. For the first time since Zivar had joined the humans, he saw the fear in their eyes. Carter continued, "But we're not backing down. We'll fight, just like we always do. Together." Zivar stood up. "Your people have proven that you are capable of overcoming great odds. I will fight alongside you." Carter nodded, her face serious. "We need every fighter we can get, and we need a plan." The next few hours were spent strategizing. Zivar's Cretan knowledge was invaluable. He knew the strengths and weaknesses of their fleet better than anyone. Yet he also understood that this battle would not be won just with tactics. It would be won with something more: human willpower. Zivar found himself in the command center, sitting across from Private Jackson. The two of them had developed an unspoken bond during the past few weeks. Jackson had become one of the most skilled fighters Zivar had ever seen, his actions driven by a deep sense of purpose. "Jackson," Zivar said, his voice quiet, "you've proven yourself to be a remarkable soldier, but what drives you to keep going? After all, the danger is growing. You know the risks." Jackson didn't hesitate. "I'm not doing this for me, Zivar. I'm doing it for my family, for everyone here. And if I fall, I want to know that I did everything I could to protect them." Zivar looked at him, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. "You humans fight with your hearts." Jackson smiled, though it was weary. "That's the only way we know how." The day of the battle arrived faster than anyone expected. The Cretan fleet appeared on the horizon, their massive ships blocking out the sun. Zivar stood at the front of the human forces, his plasma spear glowing in the midday light. The humans had prepared their defenses, but the sheer size of the Cretan fleet made it clear that they were facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. Carter's voice came through the comms, calm and strong. "All units, prepare for battle. Remember what we're fighting for." As the first shots rang out, the human forces responded with a fury that surprised even Zivar. They fought with everything they had, using every weapon, every ship, and every ounce of their will. Zivar joined them, his spear flashing as he cut down the Cretan forces that tried to break through. The battle was fierce, but the human strategy, wild, unpredictable, and full of heart, kept the Cretan off balance. The Cretan fleet was powerful, but it was slow. And the humans were faster, more adaptable. Zivar watched as Private Jackson led a team to disable the enemy's command ship, a crucial move that shifted the tide of the battle. In the midst of the chaos, Zivar was confronted by a familiar Cretan officer. It was General Theric, a ruthless warrior from his past. They locked eyes, each one knowing what was at stake. Theric's voice was cold and mocking. "So you've chosen to fight with these pathetic creatures, Zivar. How predictable." Zivar's grip on his spear tightened. "These pathetic creatures, as you call them, have something you will never understand. They fight not just for survival, but for each other. And that makes them unstoppable." With that, the battle between Zivar and Theric began. It was a clash of power and skill, with both combatants locked in a deadly dance. Zivar's spear collided with Theric's blade, sending sparks flying. The two of them fought with everything they had, but it was clear that Zivar's resolve had shifted. He no longer fought for honor, or for his people alone. He fought for something greater, something human. In the end, it was Zivar's victory. With a final strike, he disarmed Theric and sent him crashing to the ground. The Cretan general looked up at Zivar, his eyes filled with disbelief. "You are no longer one of us," Theric spat. Zivar looked down at him, his expression hardening. "I am no longer just one of you. I am something more now." With the Cretan forces in retreat, the humans celebrated their victory. The battle had been won, not just through strength, but through unity, loyalty, and the unyielding determination of those who fought. As Zivar stood among the humans, he realized that he had found a new ally in them, one that went beyond mere battle. They were his comrades now, his friends, and perhaps, one day, even his family.